Hello, and thank you for showing so much support for our new up-and-coming title, Dead and Dying. In this video, we will cover the concept and basic mechanics of the game. The overall objective of the game is to be the last player standing. Everything in the world is trying to kill you, including the other players, zombies, and good old-fashioned starvation. Dead and Dying is a game of 2 to 4 players who take turns moving to search locations in order to acquire resources. The resources gathered are used to improve their survivors and their compound. When you first open the game, the resource chips and the characters will be secured in a gray card. Punch all of them out and carefully assemble the character shards by inserting the base perpendicular to the top, forming a cross-shaped stand on the bottom. Once you have everything assembled, you should have one 18 by 18 inch board, one instruction booklet, one red and one blue 6-sided die that represent the attacking and defending dice, 150 resource chips with a black velvet bag for storing and shuffling them, four sets of compound improvement cards with 5 improvement cards and an upgrade reference card, 4 sets of colored survivor shards, one set of 24 zombie shards, and one event spinner, complete with spinning arrow, as well as 15 black winks to cover up the search locations once they've been searched. Now let's talk about the various game components more specifically. In Dead and Dying, you have 4 classes of survivors that you upgrade sequentially. The Axeman, the Pistol Runner, the Rifleman, and the Bowman. As you upgrade your survivors, they incur a movement and combat bonus as indicated by the white Roman numeral above the character. On the upgrade reference card, you will see the resource cost for upgrading them. Next, let's talk about resources. There are 4 different resources in Dead and Dying. Food is one of the most critical resources. You'll need to collect as much as possible. You'll need this resource to feed your survivors on every turn, to purchase new survivors, to upgrade your survivors, and to make any improvements to your compound. Ammo is also very important. You'll need ammo to conduct any sort of ranged combat. An ammo resource chip is spent from your pile every time you fire a weapon. Supplies are the rarest resource, but you'll need to collect them in order to make compound improvements, which will ultimately help you win the game. And finally, weapon upgrades. You collect weapon upgrades to improve your survivors and to make improvements to your compound. The 5th chip shown is the flashlight. The flashlight allows a player to draw a resource of their choice from the discard pile instead of drawing it blindly from the bag. Next, let's talk about compound improvements. Each player's compound is located at the corner of the board. Purchasing these compound improvements will reduce the costs of maintaining your group of survivors and ultimately winning the game. Each card indicates the costs for the upgrade on one side and the benefits on the other. Some compound improvements are very important and allow you to generate resources by drawing from the discard pile once all resources have been scavenged from their search locations. If you capture another player's compound, you can benefit from their improvements and collect extra resources per turn. Next, let's talk about the event spinner. The spinner dishes out the random events of the apocalypse at the beginning of your turn. Players may find a chance to raid another player, have their compound attacked by zombies, find zombies in the world, or find a bag of supplies left behind for the taking. We will talk more about this spinner during the mechanics of the player's turn. Next, let's talk about how to set up the game and get you ready to play. Place the game board on a table where all 4 players can reach the board. Each player should have approximately 4 inches of space to place chips and compound improvements. Each player is assigned a compound close to them, located at the corners of the board. For a 2-player game, use 2 compounds in opposite corners. All empty compounds are out of play. Place all the resource chips in a black velvet bag, mixing them thoroughly. Assign each player a color and give them a complete set of survivors and 6 compound improvement cards that correspond with their color. Place the spinner in a location where it can be clearly seen by all players. Remove the 24 zombies from the shipping card and assemble them into their bases. Place all the zombies next to the board so they can be reached easily. Each player should now have a set of compound improvement cards and 1 upgrade reference card. Review the survivor and compound improvements to understand the different types of upgrades that can be purchased and their advantages. Place the compound improvement cards with the picture side down so the resource requirements can be easily seen until the upgrade is purchased. Each player should then place one axeman in each one of the 4 starting positions within the compound. Let's talk for a moment about managing your compound. Managing and protecting your compound is important. Your compound is also where you start any new survivors and where your resources are stored. Compounds can only house a total of 5 survivors at a time. You cannot purchase a new survivor or move another survivor into the compound if all 5 spaces in the compound are occupied. The survivor would have to move out into the city to create an open space for a new survivor. Players can continue to play and survive if their compound is captured, but they will need to recapture theirs or capture another player's compound in order to win the game. Upgrading your survivors allows them to shoot further, move further, and gives them a combat bonus. The white number on the reference card indicates the combat and movement modifier for each upgraded survivor. Movement modifiers determine how far a survivor can move during their turn. Axemen start by moving 5 spaces. Once they are upgraded, they can move 6 as a pistol runner, then 7 spaces per turn once they're a rifleman or a bow hunter. Combat modifiers work very similarly. When in combat, you will add the modifier to your die roll. So if you roll a 5 on your combat roll as a pistol runner, that number becomes a 6. The symbols indicate the resources needed to upgrade at each level. All survivors must be upgraded in order, from axeman to pistol runner to rifleman, then to bow hunter. The advantage of the bow hunter is that you no longer require ammo for ranged attacks. Now that you have an understanding of the setup and components, let's talk about the gameplay. All players must complete a sequence of actions during their turn. A quick reference of this sequence is located on the back of the survivor upgrade card. If a player does an action out of sequence that affects the play, you must rectify the mistake with the other players before proceeding. The first action that the player will take is collect any resources that they're owed. If you have resource-producing compound improvements, collect them from the discard pile. Next, the player will spin the spinner. The spinner will have 4 possible outcomes. The player must resolve the event before continuing their turn. There's more on the spinner events in the next section. Next, you will move your survivors on the board. You can move all of them during a single turn. Once you are done moving, you resolve any combat with zombies or other players, and collect any resources gathered from search locations or food from hunting locations. You can now upgrade any survivors and make any compound improvements necessary. You can also trade resources with other players while it's your turn. Once all your transactions are complete, you're required to pay 1 food for every survivor you have on the board. Before your turn is over, you're required to move all the zombies on the board. Move all zombies on the board 1 space towards the closest player. If 2 players are equal distance from a zombie, move them towards the player who moved most recently. Resolve any zombie combat before moving to the next human player. Now let's talk about the event spinner in more detail. If the spinner lands on Raid Another Player, the player will draw 1 resource chip randomly from another player of their choice. For the zombie compound attack, the player will roll 1 6-sided die. The number on the die indicates the number of zombies the player has discovered on the board. The player will place the corresponding number of zombies on the board 2 spaces away from their compound. Zombies are always placed in a square formation with a maximum of 2 rows of 3 zombies. The zombie horde works very similarly. The player rolls 1 6-sided die. The number on the die indicates the number of zombies the player has discovered on the board, but this time the player will place the corresponding number of zombies on the board 2 spaces away from any survivor on their team, the player's choice. Zombies are also once again placed in a square formation with a maximum of 2 rows of 3 zombies. If the spinner lands on Find Supplies, the player will draw 1 resource chip from the discard pile. If there are no chips in the discard pile, they're out of luck. It is the apocalypse after all. Now let's discuss in more detail the actions that you can take during your turn. Moving your survivors is very simple. The player can move each of their survivors the number of spaces permitted by that survivor's class. The axeman can move 5, pistol runner 6, rifleman and bow hunter can move 7 spaces. Survivors can move or attack in any direction, including diagonally. Once you get out of the compound, you'll want to begin looking for resources as soon as possible. Search locations are marked with a red question mark. When you land on that location, you will draw 10 resource chips from the black velvet bag without looking. Once you're done, you'll place a black plastic wink covering the space to indicate that there are no more resources to search in that location. If you've been able to get to a hunting location during your turn, you can exchange ammo for some food to help feed your survivors. Hunting locations are marked with a yellow circle around a squirrel. Any survivor except for the axeman can hunt. The player will move one survivor onto the yellow circle and exchange one ammo chip for 3 food chips drawn from the discard pile. If you use the bow hunter, he can collect 3 food chips without spending an ammo chip. This can only be done once per location